so much. Palumi made us time. I'm like, girl. Well done. Fantastic. William just said something that's quite interesting. I'm so used to people getting awards when they've passed away. So a round of applause, please, to the bench and FHAs for making sure that people are given their flowers while they're still around to accept them. And now that we've made time, I'm not going to eat up the time. I'm going to quickly go into the next moderator, going to be speaking about luxury hospitality as a catalyst for urban renewal. I could say so many things about him. I could tease him. We have mutual friends, but I won't do that. Please, a round of applause. Jeremy Maggs, everybody.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Awesome.
Good morning, everybody, and thank you for the invitation. You haven't got just me by myself. It's my great pleasure to introduce my guest to you this morning, the founder and the Chief Executive Officer of Millat Hospitality, Hamza Farooqui, behind brands in South Africa like Hyatt and Pret a Manger. So, Hamza, please join me. Have a seat. Thank you very much indeed. So our topic, luxury hospitality as a catalyst for urban renewal. Let's park that for the moment, okay? Let's get straight into this if I can. We are living in an era of spiked global volatility. South Africa's growth rate is around 0.1%. We're looking at the specter of an intensified war in the Middle East. Yet you sit with me today as a flag bearer for the hospitality industry, both in South Africa and globally. And I do not understand, I do not see your optimism. I would suggest that you're living in a bubble of optimism. I would suggest, Mr. Farooqui, that you are smoking your socks, yet you're not wearing any this morning. Where does that optimism come from? What's your outlook for the sector? Because there is so much positivity here. Tell me why.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Jeremy, I think we've got to take a few paces back, and I think you're spot on, right? We are in a incredibly volatile world, but it all points to a very simple thing. Human beings, we are deeply vulnerable. And I think that's the reminder which the situation of where the world is today, the challenges that we face. And I think if I can be bold enough to say that I think the one sector and the one business which has the capability today to transform that is our business, is the hospitality tourism business. Because
in what way? How does that transformation come about?
Because I think people want more today. People want more experience today. People want something different. I think whether it was COVID, where people and the human race realized just how vulnerable they are, just how fragile life is, just how, we here today, we are gone tomorrow. And I think when human beings as a race realize that, you can have a war sparked in 2 minutes. You can have a world power sitting in a room and flicking on a television and saying, this is what your country is. Things can change very rapidly. And if there's one sector which can give human beings that escape, if there's one sector which can give human beings that choice of hope, if there's one sector, it's actually hospitality, it's travel. So I think if there's one reminder out of all of this, is people are going to want to experience experiences. The challenge we have is, can the sector deliver? Can the sector deliver those experiences? Can they deliver the dreams and the aspirations for what people are looking for?
And part of the dreams and aspirations, Hamza, is the whole urban renewal debate. But within the current, and we'll get to that now, but within the current paradigm that you're operating, has your approach to risk and risk management changed? It has to have.
So I think
you're more cautious. You're more judicious in the way in which you make decisions.
I'd like to think we're a lot more disruptive, right? The risk matrix, I think, is where I think the problem is, right? In this industry, everyone has sat on the fence. Banks, they sit on the fence. Brands, I frankly think, also sit on the fence, right? They look for one opportunistic owner, works great. I think where there's a need to change the dial is around getting stuff done. Everyone just sits on the fence, and I think the risk matrix is where the challenge is. Execution capability is where the challenge is. And I think even when we talk of urban renewal, right, there isn't the kind of intentionality, there isn't the kind of real desire to transform spaces. There are pockets in the world where I think we've seen those cities change. But I think intentionality, execution capability, and I think moving away from that risk matrix is what's needed. And I think we'd like to think at Millat that's what we do differently.
Let's talk about cities changing then, and let's get back to our topic here, which is luxury hospitality as a catalyst for urban renewal. All well and good, Hamza, but critics will argue that luxury hospitality often leads to gentrification rather than renewal. So how do you respond then to claims that developments like this displace rather than uplift communities?
So I think we shouldn't be apologetic, right? There's always going to be circumstances where you will have to replace buildings, people, and spaces. But I think you've always got to look at the offset, right? When a luxury brand arrives in a urban space, or for that matter, any space, right? There is significant good which it brings. It brings brand awareness, it brings skills, it brings optimized supply chain.
But try telling that to someone who's been kicked out.
But I think that's where I think a quid pro quo around where are they getting kicked out to, right? Now, if we talk about gentrification, sort of what happened in a space, many people were concerned many years ago when I was building my first hotel in Bukap, right? Challenging space, a lot of concerns around gentrification. But we found a path on how do we make the community a very inclusive part for that. We found a common thread. And I think if you are a developer or if you are a capital provider and you can find that thread, and that thread doesn't necessarily need to be about giving them another home, but it needs to be a path towards economic prosperity. If people can provide that. And by the way, that's again why I think this sector is so powerful. Its ability to actually really make that impact quickly. Because I think the challenge we face, Jeremy, today is there isn't enough speedy impact. There is impact, there is jobs, there is data, but it's not happening quick enough. And I think if there's one sector which can do it quickly, it's this. But again, we need to be intentional about what we're doing.
I accept to a point your argument about the economic thread, but your big challenge is to ensure that local communities benefit beyond just entry-level jobs, which, Hamza, is often the case. How do you make sure that the thread is a little wider and perhaps is a little bit more golden?
But that's where you need to go back and double-click into the sector and say entry-level jobs is where you start, but you need to really make sure that you are career pathing in people into higher skills. We're opening the world's smallest park, Hyatt, in the next 2 weeks. I have an entire team which is doing a very curated training program, not the brand-delivered training program, but a Millat-delivered training program. Why? Because when you build the people with a very unique skill set, and I'm not talking about the standard training which the industry does, but when you start training staff and people on emotional intelligence, cultural awareness, you start making them a lot more employable. You start making them better individuals. So I think the move towards entry-level jobs and really upskilling people is again a function of intentionality. How do we move that dial around getting people better skilled and getting them better resources? Because again, if you look at the brands today, they've got the training portals, but the training portals are giving them the basics. They're giving them what's worked in Europe. They're giving them what's worked in America. And I think there is a dire need to have something deeply local, relevant, and curated.
Providing, of course, your strategy is a sustainable one. So what mechanisms should be in place to hold ambitious developers like yourself accountable?
So I think at the end of the day, it's about the results. We're a privately held, privately funded organization. I built my first hotel when I was 27. I didn't know anything about this business. Today, if you look where Millat is, we're one of the largest owner-operators of Hyatt hotels in this country. We've got a very large food service strategy. And I think at the end of the day, it's the track record, it's the execution capability. And that's, again, the challenge we have in this country and in this continent, right? There just isn't enough execution. There's a lot of talk. there's just, there's policy, but there just isn't enough execution. And I think the biggest accountability methodology I think we need is execution.
Why do you think there is a reticence when it comes to accelerated execution there?
Because I think there's a lack of capability. Everyone is going to say there isn't enough money in the system, right? And, my view is you need money to get by, but great ideas find money. Money should never be anyone's challenge. I think there's a serious lack of execution capability, and then you enter the space of will, right? There isn't just enough public sector will framework to support that. So I think there's three pieces. You need capital, you need public sector sort of will, and that's where sort of the public sector government part comes. But there's also capability, right? There's too many players, everyone is trying, and that's good, by the way, competition is good, but the capability just isn't there. And that's unfortunately something the African continent has to deal with, has to move the dial on, and that's capability.
We are sitting in the heart of Cape Town, which is a flagship as far as urban renewal is concerned. There's no doubt about that. And I speak with some experience because I've just come in from Johannesburg. But what incentives or requirements do you think city authorities should introduce to ensure that development such as yours is for the public good and not just for the benefit of shareholder value?
So I think they have to first understand hotels are not just a place for people to stay. Hotels are a vital fabric of countries, societies. We should deem them as social infrastructure. And when you start, because if you look at it, most travelers in the world, they go to London. First question, what do you ask? Where did you stay? It becomes a fabric of that place. And I think hotels are platforms for where success, where business, where communities come together. And I think if you start seeing hotels as vital social infrastructure, then I think you need to price them, you need to put them in a tax band where there's accessibility. If you look at a hotel P&L today, there's still great leakage, right? In cities just claiming rates and taxes and valuing them on the same commercial property scale. And I think those incentives aren't there. That incentives will come when I think government starts to understand that hotels, travel, tourism are important drivers. If you look at other parts of the world, they got it, and look at where their economies are today.
So which global cities are getting this right?
I'm going to give you a very left field example. I am not going to take the ones which everyone is familiar with, but go look at the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia today, right? Go look at how, and yes, admittedly, they had lots of capital, right? But go look at how transformational they have already executed. If you go into zones like the Ria and what they have done, it's exceptional. Go with a story that everyone is deeply familiar with, the UAE. Look at how they've transformed their cities into what that is today. Yes, supercharged political zones, but they've even managed to keep all of those things out. And I think that's where execution capability, getting stuff done. And I think if Africa can take a piece of just getting it done, right? Just getting out of the talk shop mentality, sitting on the fence, and just get things going, I think will transform and renew the cities into spaces of very vital social infrastructure. And I think will make the impact that we really need to.
I've got two quick questions before I leave you. First of all, I accept your argument to a point, but in a climate-stressed country like South Africa, how do you justify high consumption, water-intensive luxury hotels in cities, often where the city center itself is facing infrastructure collapse?
Well, in the first instance, you're hoping that the government should have or would have invested in the right infrastructure where this challenge would have
Which
arisen,
is not
right?
always the case in this country.
Which is not the case, and that's not the doing of luxury hospitality. But I think we've again got to look at the multiplier for every luxury guest, what that spend sits in the ecosystem and what that gives into that ecosystem, where there's value which sits for them really to benefit on. if a luxury traveler comes and spends $1,000, that's equivalent to probably 10 select service or full service rooms. There's huge opportunity and value leakage which governments and the ecosystem benefits on, which actually reinvests into the infrastructure at the end of the day.
In conclusion then, what's your call to action to city authorities and I guess to urban planners?
I think we need to focus on execution. I think there needs to be a concept of accessibility and service. It's an issue which government and planners have, right? They think they're doing you a favor. Try walking to the city of Cape Town. Again, maybe a different political regime. They think they're doing you a favor. And I think if we can move that dial away, have a concept of service, government is here to serve, right? And I think if there's a concept of service, not that they're doing private sector a favor, and we can come out of this favor mold, then I think we can really build a very helpful ecosystem.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you, everybody.